Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner. Welcome to tonight's edition of The Robust Opposition. I'm really pleased to be doing this show tonight with one of my favorite candidates running for office in 2018, as well as one of my favorite people, favorite activists in California, Jovanka Beckles. How are you doing tonight, Jovanka?
I'm doing well, Lauren. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate I appreciate you and all that you do in this movement for justice. So certainly a pleasure to be invited onto your show.
Oh, well, as you know, I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, but you've been so busy that I'm glad we're able to get you on at this crucial time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So the title of my show, people, is Will the Real Progressive Please Stand Up? And the reason I say that is since the Bernie Sanders campaign, progressive has been a very overused word. And there's a lot of establishment Democrats out there. We can call them establishment Democrats or corporate Democrats or what is Bill Clinton? The New Democrats, the third wave Democrats, the Mod Dems, they are in Sacramento. All these different names for these Democrats that are, in our opinion, not really progressive. And the way you can tell a progressive candidate is someone who does not take corporate money and is therefore what we call a corporate-free candidate. And that would be Jovanka Beckles.
All right. That's right. I'm really amazed at all of the different language, but I'm actually even more, I don't know why I'm surprised. I shouldn't be surprised, but it does still surprise me at the fact that, you have moderate and centrists using the word progressive now because they recognize that that's the way to be. So whether or not their voting record reflects progressive values, they certainly have been using that word a lot. And I'm glad that I think we have to be able to distinguish the difference, between everyone else everyone's calling themselves a progressive and those who are actually not taking any corporate money. That's true, being a true progressive in this movement.
Great. Now, I want to talk about all your progressive positions because our positions on the issues also are what define us as true progressives. So I want to talk about your positions and I'll lay out a series of issues and then we can talk about your opponents and you'll give us a little bit of background about them. I'm going to ask you who is endorsing them, certain, elected officials that are self-proclaimed progressives, as well as, self-proclaimed progressive organizations. So we're going to talk about that and then close on how people can help your campaign because you're a real progressive.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. Will the real progressive stand up?
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about your background. You are involved with the Richmond Progressive Alliance. And as people who have watched my show know, and also some of my live streams, I've interviewed your companion on the RPA, Gail McLaughlin, who is my favorite candidate for lieutenant governor.
Yes.
Tell us about how you got involved in politics, specifically your work with the Richmond Progressive Alliance, and some of the accomplishments of which you are most proud.
Well, let's see. I got involved with the Richmond Progressive Alliance when my wife and I moved to Richmond, 2005. Back in 2005, so 13 years ago, we were living in Alameda. We moved, but we'd been working in Richmond, doing the same work with children's mental health. And we moved to Richmond because it was affordable, and as well as the fact that we really liked the fact that Richmond was and continues to be an amazingly diverse city. So when we were able to afford a home here, a house here, we wanted to get involved because it's one thing to live in a city and not get involved, and it's another to say, you know what, this is where I live. This is where we're going to be living for quite a while. We need to be invested in this community. And so we started doing some research. At the time, Gail McLaughlin was running for mayor. And so we just moved here and we thought, who is this woman we're seeing all these yard signs for? So we decided to Google her, read her platform, really saw that we had our values were in line and I liked her. But then it wasn't really until then we saw her on a candidates forum with the other mayoral candidates at the time. And we really just felt a genuineness in her. And it was a genuineness that we didn't really see in the other candidates. It just seemed like folks were, doing this for whatever reasons, and she seemed genuinely interested in justice. So then we found out that she was a member of this organization, and we really wanted to be involved in our community. So yeah, we joined the RPA, and so one of the I would say one of the legislation that one of the policies that I'm most proud of, that because the first thing I moved when I became a council member was the Bandbox Policy, and at the time the state hadn't adopted that policy yet. Richmond did, and it was because of the work that I was. We worked in conjunction with the Safe Return Project, which is a nonprofit that works with the formerly incarcerated, and they shared their challenges and they shared their concerns with not being able to find employment once they came back to Richmond, and they thought, they said that this is really keeping us from being able to be the kinds of productive, law-abiding citizens that we want to be. So together we developed that policy, and it was the most progressive Bandbox policy. Bandbox is a term that's used for basically giving people a fair chance at employment, and that's really what it is: fair chance at employment ordinance, which means that that box that we see on every application that asks the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Have you ever been in jail? I mean, it asks you that same question in different ways. And usually what that means is if you check that box, more likely than not, your application will end up in the trash, and you won't even get an opportunity to get your foot in the door to introduce yourself and to prove that you have the skills and the ability and the desire to do a good job for that company.
Yeah, because after all, if you've served your time, you've paid your debt to society, assuming that you even were incarcerated for a legitimate reason.
That's right.
But what about as far as housing? Is it also, because I know on rental applications, that box is there. Did you get that banned off of housing applications?
Yes, we did. In fact, we're working on it, just tightening it up. Because as you know, remember with AB 109, folks were going to be coming back they were going to be releasing, folks with, lesser convictions, right? Nonviolent convictions. Where are those people going to go back? Well, they have to go back to the city where they offended. And if you're going back to the city where you offended and you lived in public housing, you can forget it. So that only, adds to the level of homelessness that we're currently seeing. So we are working on a policy that bans the box from that question, and so folks they won't be discriminated against as far as public housing is concerned. And so the only thing that we were not able to do, we could not ban it for private companies. We couldn't ban it for the private industry, which is why I'm really happy that, following Richmond's lead, and I'm really proud of the fact that we've led in so many different issues and policies. The state now has Bandbox, which covers private individuals and companies as well.
You started to say, let me back up a bit. You were going to talk about another accomplishment?
Well, not so much another accomplishment, but why I got involved in politics. And so, my wife and I, we wanted to get involved just to have a good community and to be a part of the community and to help make community. But I wasn't considering actually getting into, government. I was not thinking about running for any office. But it wasn't until one day we were the victims of a home invasion robbery. And as you know, just the term home invasion, they had weapons, they had a gun, and they really terrified us for quite some time. But the one defining moment that I share as often as I can, because I will never forget it. I will never forget that moment because of the trauma, but I will never forget it because of what one of the young men said, Lauren. And that young man, after terrorizing us with a gun and his buddy with the same thing, went to our son's room to find other goodies, I suppose. Saw him with his pet, saw him with his guitar, his video games, et cetera, and just said, wow, it must be nice to be loved. Now, she and I work in the mental health industry, okay? That I will
Yeah.
never forget that, because as traumatized as we were, that really spoke loudly to how our young people were and continue to feel. And they were feeling hopeless. They were
Yeah.
feeling like community, the society that they're growing up in, doesn't care anything about them. And so after that moment, weeks later, I thought about the fact that although I work in the mental health field, although I'm able to provide healing to not only the children, but the families, something else needed to happen, right? And that something else that needed to happen was to create policies that level the playing field, create the kinds of policies that are making these young men feel hopeless. And so I'm really proud of the fact that since 8 years later, I've really created the kinds of policies that has improved the quality of life for the residents in Richmond. Particularly what's closest to my heart and dearest to my heart are the children.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your policies, but first I want to get back to where I first met you was in 2014 when I so excitedly came up to Richmond for a fundraiser for you and Gail, the Richmond Progressive Alliance that Steve Early told me about. And Steve Early is with, he was with CWA, the Communications Workers of America.
Yes.
And I went up there honestly to meet Bernie Sanders because he was headlining the fundraiser.
Yes, he was.
And I had met him before in 2011 when I asked him to please challenge Obama in the 2012 primary, and he said no, because he didn't want to take on a popular Democrat, right?
That's right.
But when I met you and Gail, I just was so turned on by your policies. And what you were able to do with that election is you won, even though the Chevron-sponsored candidates outspent you 20-1.
Yes.
So Chevron, I also hosted a book event for Steve Early in my house, who wrote Refinery Town, about how Chevron pretty much ran that city of Richmond. They even had a desk in the mayor's office.
Yes.
So you beat them back. Why don't you talk about, how you campaigned? Because that was pretty revolutionary in and of itself.
Absolutely. Okay. It was it was incredibly revolutionary. The Progressive Alliance, that is an alliance of people, activists from every background, pretty much, age, diverse in age, diverse in race, diverse in even political affiliations. We are a diverse organization of different folks who really just believe in social, economic, and environmental justice and racial justice. And so what we did is we mobilized the community. We informed the community of what was going on. We shared information. The reason why Chevron's candidates had been able to stay in power as long as they did was because people were going with what they knew. I like this guy. He says he's for us. But no one ever really but show us what you've done for us in, say, the last 30 years, right? And so when we started organizing and mobilizing, we started sharing that kind of information with folks. But the message that really resonated with the Richmond community was when we said, or when, let's say for me, for example, I knocked on your door, I introduced myself to you, and I said, I'm Jovanka Beckles, I'm running for city council. I will not take one penny from Chevron. People understood that. They got it. They realized, they saw that the connection between people who were, and I always use the word sponsored by these corporations. So the folks who got their seats with the help of Chevron, they saw that they weren't doing anything for them. And so they realized, they connected the dots that, if that means that if you're not taking their money, you're going to be working for us. And people said it just that clearly. And I said, absolutely, I will be working for you. I'm only beholden to you. And that message resonated with folks because, Richmond was in dire need of so many different resources that we weren't getting because these folks were looking out for the bottom line of this corporation.
And so how does that play into your environmental policy? Obviously, if you went to the State Assembly, I assume you would vote in favor of a ban on fracking?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I want to get started on right away. We don't have time for incremental changes. We are at the point of no return. From what I understand, we're 100 years ahead of schedule. That's scary. I have children. I have a child. I have grandchildren. I want them to have a planet to live. And so we can't afford to take our time with regard to the ways that we address climate change. So absolutely, that would be one of the first things I begin to address, and that's fracking. We have to ban fracking immediately.
Now, let me ask you, without naming your opponents, we'll get into them specifically a little bit later, and who is backing them, and who's endorsed them, and who is working for them. Yeah. But have your major opponents also committed to ban fracking?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this race. That's full of a lot of progressives. Everybody is agreeable that we need to ban fracking. We don't usually dive into the meat of it, though. How soon do you believe that we need? Do you believe we need to take our time and do it right, or do you believe that we need to do it immediately? No ifs, ands, and buts about it. I think that we would probably get different questions. Different answers with regard to the depth of seriousness, of how quickly they want to make change and address our climate change.
Okay. What about, are you familiar with that bill that basically Jerry Brown pushed through the legislature at the last minute, which was a cap and trade bill? Yeah. That there were 50 environmental justice organizations that were supporting Wajkowski's bill and De Leon's bill. That didn't even get out of a committee, which I find very interesting, by the way, since Wajkowski is chairman of that energy committee and Kevin De Leon is a president pro tem of the Senate. You would think that they would have been able to at least get it out of committee if they really supported it. This was the group that was supported by 50 environmental justice groups, but that's not what happened. The one that Jerry Brown wrote with the oil industry, that's the one that got rushed through and passed. Right.
That's right. And I think that what we're seeing now in the climate that we are in, I'm meeting a lot of people who are recognizing the fact that that's why we have to elect corporate free candidates, plain and simple, in a point blanks, because people are going to say all kinds of things, right? And they're going to have us believing that they truly support our positions. But then the minute they're elected, they've forgotten who the voters are and are now, they are and have always been beholden to their corporate sponsors. So the only way we're going to change that is when we start electing corporate free candidates and reform our current system.
Now, have any of your opponents pledged to be corporate free?
No, I'm the only one who has it on all of my information, although they will say when the question is asked, no, I've never taken any money. And someone actually made a mistake and said, well, no one's going to offer me anything. Yeah. And so that's the difference. Just because they're currently not taking it, it just means that no one's offered them anything. But I think the question needs to be, if offered, if someone, laid $100,000 down in front of you, would you say no to that? And I think that's the question that needs to be asked, because I would unequivocally say absolutely not. I'm beholden to the people, and this is not how government should be run.
Now, let me ask you another question about campaign finance, because, Kamala Harris, who I call counterfeit Kamala, hashtag counterfeit Kamala, just basically pledged to not take corporate money from corporate PACs, and Cory Booker, who I call bought Booker, did the same thing, and Kristen Gillibrand. And isn't it interesting that all the three of them are considered, Democratic candidates for 2020? Right. It's been written about that that's not how they get the major money from these corporate PACs. What they get is the CEOs and the top executives of these corporations giving the maximum individual contribution.
That's right.
So when people talk about being corporate free, it's only one part of the equation. The next part of the equation, and my question to you has to be, what percentage, what is your average dollar donation, and what percentage of donations come from small dollars versus people contributing the max?
I have the most small contributions of all 12 candidates. So of all the candidates, I have the most individual donations, and I have the most donations from within the district. So I'm really proud of that. And it was a high percentage. I could look it up now because I remember posting it. But the percentage of folks, individual donations that I've received are more than all of the other candidates. And so that really, although we have one candidate in the race saying that, that she's grassroots and she's, et cetera, she's having all these parties, I can say my donors, though, are from this district. 70%, Lauren, is from individual donations. So
okay, you got a message?
My wife is in the other room, and I guess she might be listening.
All right, excellent. Excellent. I hope she's listening, and I hope she's sharing it, and I hope all of you are sharing the show, because independent media, I guarantee you, the broadcast stations are not giving Jovanka a half an hour of time, right?
That's right. That's right. All right, so I'm going to share this on social media, and everybody share this interview, please.
So my next litmus test question is single payer.
Yes.
You support SB 562?
Yes. Yeah, I support it. I've supported healthcare for all since 2011, and we brought forward resolutions around our support for single payer. So this was before we got CNA and all the nurses got involved in it. This is something that I've always believed in, and I think it's a shame that it just stalled on the speaker's desk. And I tell folks that that's why it's so important to follow the money. Follow the money. When we have these kinds of legislation that's going to benefit the people, and it doesn't get passed or it stalls, follow the money. And then we follow the money, right? Of course, we're Rendon, and we find out that what is it, over $400,000 he received from the pharmaceutical companies, right?
Yeah. Now, how about your opponents? Have any of them also pledged to support SB 562?
They all have, and yes, they've all pledged to do that. They've all signed the pledge to not take over $200 from the fossil fuel industry. And I, of course, I feel I go beyond that. I go further than that and say I won't accept a penny from the fossil fuel industry, and that's really the test. $200, you're still beholden. They've still given you a gift, and 0 cents is really ideal, and that's my position.
Yeah. Okay. Next issue: housing. Do you support the repeal of Costa-Hawkins? Do you support statewide rent control?
Absolutely. In fact, Richmond is the first city in California in 30 years to pass rent control. I don't know if you remember the story of how we actually did it, though, Lauren, because we initially passed it as a city council. That's what happens when you have a corporate-free majority on the city council. You can pass things like this. So we passed rent control, but then the apartment associations and the landlord associations, they came, they collected signatures, they paid signature gatherers. I heard some astronomical amounts to get signatures. So when you offer people a lot of money per individual signature, what we saw was people were lying. They were lying about what folks were signing. So they would go up and say, hey, we need your signature so that we can have rent control. Well, of course, because we have informed, right, voters in Richmond. Folks would say, no, Richmond passed rent control. And they said, yeah, but it doesn't cover all of the units. And what they didn't say is that's because of Costa-Hawkins. So, of course, it doesn't cover all the units, but it would cover, a large amount. And so people signed it, and they repealed our initial rent control ordinance. And so as a result of that, community activists got together, collected signatures, put it on the ballot, and it passed overwhelmingly. So I believe in it. I'm proud that we were the first city in 30 years to pass it, but now our hands are tied. Our hands are tied because of the state law, right? Costa-Hawkins. And so I have been talking about repealing Costa-Hawkins since the beginning of this campaign. And I'm glad to see that, again, activists are collecting signatures to put it on the ballot, because then that way you don't have to worry about it getting repealed. If for some bad reasons, this new wave and climate of elected corporate fee candidates, for whatever reason, doesn't last, you could have a legislature that, our current legislature could turn over to one that would say, well, never mind, we're gonna repeal that law. But when voters vote on it, then now it's a lot harder. Just like Prop 13, right? They can't be passed, right? Through the legislature. It has to go back to the voters, and that's also another campaign that I support wholeheartedly, and was one of the first people to sign that petition to reform Prop 13.
Great. Well, they we're going to try to get enough signatures to get it on the ballot this year, and I don't think they were able to do that. So now it's going to go on the ballot next year.
Yeah.
But so is that like 562 also? Do all your opponents also say they support to try to compete with you to be more progressive? They also support repealing Costa-Hawkins?
They all support except one candidate. Buffy doesn't believe it needs to be repealed. She believes it just needs to be reformed. So she and I think another candidate, we have one Republican in the race. He's a student at Cal, and I think he also doesn't believe it needs to be repealed. So, but the majority of us do, and again, that's how we're all alike in this race. But I although we're alike in a lot of ways, I believe that there are so many different issues that makes me stand out.
And that's what I want to get into. I want to get in before talking about Buffy Wicks, who seems to be getting all the endorsements and all the money and all the media attention. Personally, I think she's a Hillbot, and I know I probably shouldn't use that term because it's like a Bernie bro or something. I don't like when people call me a Bernie. Not that they would call me a Bernie bro, but
right.
You know what I'm saying. I think she obviously ran Hillary's campaign in California, Northern California, whatever. So she is a major Hillary supporter. Right. And I feel that it's very difficult for someone to say, as progressive friends of mine do, let's stop relitigating the 2016 election. It doesn't really matter who they supported. What matters is what issues they support now, if they support our progressives issues. And I have to vehemently disagree with that position because I think, just to give an example, if you have been a long-term supporter of single-payer health care, how could you have supported Hillary Clinton, who almost gleefully said, single payer will never, ever, ever happen, right? Right. So personally, I feel it is a litmus test as to who you supported in the 2016 primary. But why don't you, before we go into the other candidates and who is supporting them, why don't you talk about the distinct differences between you and the leading opponents?
Well, the distinct difference is that, first of all, I'm the only candidate who has a consistent track record of actually creating the policies that improve the quality of life for folks. Everyone is promising all these things. I support this and I support that, but I'm the only one who's actually created policies. And you can look at my voting record and you will see that there's not been one time where I've compromised in terms of will I support this the bottom line of some corporation, or am I going to support the renters? Am I going to support the coal industry coming through here with coal, or am I going to support the health of the residents? So I'm the only one with the track record. I'm not just saying trust me to do what I say I'm going to do. I'm the only one saying, look at what I've done. I've raised, I brought forward and raised the minimum wage. I'm not just talking about, oh yeah, I support the minimum wage. I actually did something about it, brought it forward, and the city council passed to raise the minimum wage, and Richmond minimum wage will be $15 an hour, January of 2019. It's currently $13.41. Wow. And that's what I've done. I'm not just talking about supporting it. I've done it. I'm not just talking about supporting rent control and repealing Costa-Hawkins. I actually helped bring forward and pass rent control. I'm not just talking about reforming the criminal justice system and having these wonderful ideas. I've actually done things in Richmond. We now have a reentry center. We passed Ban the Box for employment and housing. The things that we've done to support our community, our returning citizens, that community of folks who've been incarcerated and returning back to Richmond. I'm not just talking about, saying something that sounds good to folks. I've actually implemented the kinds of policies that I've done. And now I want to take that. I want to make it district wide. I want to be able to take these victories that we've done in Richmond to Sacramento, and people can actually trust me because they can look at my voting record and see that I've already done it.
Okay, now it's time to pivot to talking about your opponents, because
Okay.
you sold me.
All right, yay.
So we have Buffy Wicks, and
Okay.
Buffy Wicks is, obviously a white woman. I don't know many Black people named Buffy.
Buffy, right.
And she was working for Hillary very hard to get her elected in California.
Right.
And I understand from you that she's being supported by the charter school PAC, which is very disturbing to me because, as my viewers know, I'm very much against charter schools. Where do you stand on charter schools, Jovanka?
Yeah, I actually have called for a moratorium statewide, but I also believe that in addition to a moratorium, we have to go even further than that. We really have to make all of these charter institutions accountable, right? And they should be accountable to a publicly elected body of folks. And right now, that is not the case. So I believe in public education. I don't believe in privatizing our education system. Do not. So right now, there's so many ways that they are not being held accountable. They're not accountable to their teachers being union, their employees being unionized. The Brown Act. The Brown Act, that was what I was looking for. So many different ways, and really they're not helping with regard to even segregation. I mean, so these schools are like, most of them are pretty segregated. You're taking away sort of the cream of the crop from public schools, and it really is sucking the lifeblood, these charter schools from our public schools. And so that's where I stand on that, Laura. I'm the only one who has, in fact, well, now everybody is doing that. All of us are saying, we want to call for a moratorium and really saying the same thing that I'm saying. And they should be, accountable to a publicly elected body. We're all saying the same thing. But again, when you asked me earlier, what distinguishes me? Well, what distinguishes me is I did something about it in Richmond. So not even, the not even the school board candidate can say that, she's brought forward a moratorium on new schools.
Right. And that's the school board candidate is Judy Appel.
Right, correct.
So now I was reading up a little bit about these opponents here. And, again, with the charter school, we know how much money they're putting into Antonio Villaraigosa's campaign. And that's because he tried to turn all of LAUSD charter when he was mayor. So I don't support anyone that they support. The Silicon Valley billionaires, are supporting Buffy Wick.
Yes.
And let's talk about Tony Thurmond, because it's Tony Thurmond's seat that you're taking, and he's vacating. I guess he was termed out. Yeah. He's running for superintendent of public education.
Correct.
And we're supporting him for that, of course, because his opponent, Marshall Tuck, is a real privatizer. Exactly. He takes money from Eli Broad and all those guys that are trying to privatize education.
Exactly.
But I don't like what I heard that Tony Thurmond did to you, okay? Because he was the representative. He knows very well the wonderful work that you did. Right. And yet he he asked your opponent, Rochelle, what's her last name?
Purdue Okimoto.
He asked her to run, and she's a nurse, and she just had limited experience. She hadn't even been on her in her office. What was she on?
She was on the El Cerrito City Council for less than a year, I think, before she even, before when she decided to run. Hadn't been a year yet.
And you were telling me that I actually thought that the nurses tried to get her to run, but you told me that no, Tony asked her to run. And the reason was, well, why don't you tell the reason? It has to do with the corporate free again.
The corporate free message.
Yeah.
Yeah, he when he introduced me to the Black caucus, they really had a hard time with my corporate free message. In fact, most of the questions had to do with my whether or not I'd be willing to accept corporate donations, even if it's through PACs. And I'm sure they're all doing good work, for their constituents, but they didn't like that message. In fact, a couple of them said, well, do you think you're better than we are? Because you don't take much corporate money and we do. And I said, absolutely not. I don't think I'm better than you. That's my position. And it's a position that makes me feel like I have some integrity. And it's a position that keeps my level of integrity at one point. Of course, not condemning you, not saying you're doing anything wrong. And so even with that kind of an answer, they just did not like the fact that I was a corporate free candidate, and they needed to be able to endorse someone who would accept corporate money.
Right. And I also heard from someone in your area that Buffy Wicks encouraged Tony Thurmond to do this so that she would make sure that the African-American vote was split, which I find
now that makes sense.
Extremely cynical and awful. So now, Rochelle is obviously getting the nurse's endorsement, and it's very upsetting because she's a nurse, and that's why they're endorsing her. Yeah. But like you said, she had less than a year's worth of experience, and the nurses didn't even suggest a dual endorsement. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It was a little disappointing because I do have a long relationship with CNA. We collaborate in so many different issues. I really love that they're huge advocates, big advocates for SB 562. But it's not just it's not one single issue we have to be concerned about in this era, right? In these times, there are multiple issues that we should be focused on, not just single payer. I mean, health, wealth, disparity, and there's just way too much. There's a planet, there's a climate, there's, as I said, income inequality. There's criminal justice reform that needs to happen. So it isn't. I'm not just a single issue candidate, and I think that none of us should be.
Yes, and it's disappointing because the nurses were also pushing for that millionaire's tax, because I think they do understand, these issues, and yet for them to, endorse her, and they're also putting money in. You talked about billboards.
They're let's see, in the East Bay, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4 billboards so far, and about 5 mailers to the whole district, which is really expensive. So I believe so far their independent expenditure from the last time I looked at the forms, I think it totaled up over $100,000 of independent expenditures.
Yes. And, Randy Shaw from Beyond Cron, who's very familiar with the politics up there, stated in his recent article that were it not for her entrance in the race, you would probably be comfortably the number 2 candidate besides Buffy Wicks, who has all that money from, Silicon Valley billionaires and the charter school PAC and all the other corporate types. And Judy Appel, I guess she's gotten the endorsement of the teachers union because she is on the Berkeley school board.
Correct.
But Randy Cron doesn't seem to think she has a chance. She'll get Berkeley, and that's kind of about it. So I wanted to talk about who you do have supporting you so that we end on a positive note here.
Yeah.
Tell us about the different...
Proud. I'm proud to be endorsed by Our Revolution. In fact, Our Revolution endorsed my candidacy, our campaign in 2017, long before they endorsed any won for the 2018 race. So that really is an incredible honor. And the reason they did it so soon and as quickly as they did, because of the organizations, the graduate organizations that supported me, but because they saw my track record. They know that I can be trusted to do exactly as I said, because I've done it. So there's our revolution. There's the Richmond Progressive Alliance. There's the Pinole Progressive Alliance, the Berkeley Progressive Alliance. There are all three of the Cal student progressive organizations. And I have 6 union or endorsements. My own union, of course, I'm proud of that. Teamsters, the Joint Council 7, that's the statewide, that's our statewide union. SCIU, California, statewide SCIU. Then we have not UTR, pardon me, ATU, Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 192, NUHW, the National Union of Healthcare Workers. And then we have the classified employees, the Berkeley classified employees, which is sort of, the classified employees. And who am I forgetting? Let's see.
Did you mention UPTE CWA?
And then UPTE CWA. That's the 6th. So 6 unions, and that's really how we're gonna do this. That's really how we're gonna turn the tides around, when we mobilize and we organize and we stick together and not let them divide us.
Yes.
So I'm really proud of that. But really, when you look at all of the organizations and leaders like Danny Glover, has endorsed this campaign, my campaign. When you look at the leaders, the community leaders, many of the Berkeley City Council members, all of the progressive council members in Richmond, you will find that these organizations are all grassroots organizations that have been and continue to be in the trenches with the people fighting for justice. And so I'm really proud of that. That's why I have 5 environmental organizations as well that have endorsed this campaign, our campaign.
Which ones?
Of the environmental organizations, we have CBE, APEN Action. Let's see, the League of Conservation Voters.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Because they're usually pretty centrist.
They endorsed myself, and so I was really happy about that. And then we have SEHA, California Environmental Justice Alliance. Alliance. Sunflower Alliance.
Shoshana Wexler, right?
Yeah,
exactly. I love her.
So 5 environmental organizations have endorsed our campaign, 6 unions, and so many leaders and organizations that are corporate free and believe in justice, as our pledge says, for all.
And why don't you say all the cities in your district, just so people know?
Absolutely. So all of the cities in this district, they consist of Hercules. So really from Hercules all the way to North Oakland. So Hercules, Pinole, San Pablo, El Sobrante, Richmond, El Cerrito, Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville, and the northern part of Oakland. So the Oakland Hills as well as North Oakland. So it's a huge district. It's the most progressive district in the state. And so we deserve to have the most progressive representative in this race.
So now if people can't necessarily, if they don't live in those communities and they can't vote for you, I've put up your website so that they can donate. Now, what about doing remote phone banking for you?
People can do remote phone banking too. We've got the software. So if you contact us and say you want to help, you want to make phone calls, and please do contact us, team@jovanka.org, and let us know you want to do some phone banking. We will set you up. You just need your computer, and the computer will do the dialing for you. And we've got a script, so it's really, really easy. You can do it from the comfort of your own home, and you can make a difference. Just like that, just that easy.
Great. All right. Well, I hope that all of my viewers support Jovanka because she really is fantastic. It's like with Gail McLaughlin. It's very rare when you actually have someone to vote for who's actually accomplished a lot of these progressive things. And we didn't even have time to talk about that great police chief that you brought in, which I read about in Refinery Town, who basically completely changed criminal justice to instead of making the police the enemy, the police became the partner in the community. And you even had your police chief marching in the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yes, exactly. He was the former police chief. Our new police chief, he moved to, got a position in, I think it was Arizona or New Mexico, one of those states. So now we have a new police chief, but we, he continues in our, in the direction of community policing. But even though we have community policing in Richmond, we still needed policies. And one of the policies that I brought forward was our transparency policy. So basically, if somebody ends up in the hospital because of an interaction with one of our officers, it's an automatic investigation. Before that, they had to fill out forms and make sure they got those forms turned in on time. And we argue when you're traumatized by some kind of interaction with the police, you might actually forget, you might miss your deadline. And so we thought that that's not something that people should have to worry about. So brought in about more transparency for our police department and continuing our community policing model. Thank you, Lauren. I just wanted to say I really have appreciated being on your show. I'm getting ready now to go and meet some more of these really passionate, fired up DSA members. They're having a social, so I'm due there now. So anyway, that's another one of those endorsements that I'm incredibly proud to have gotten.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Yes. Well, say hi to the DSA people for me.
All right,
they rock too, just like
they
you.
They do. All right, Lauren.
All right, everybody. Until tomorrow, keep fighting.